Welcome back, Year 10s, to your next lesson on crime and punishment, continuing our look at punishment in the 20th century. Today, we're going to be looking at the changing role of punishment in the 20th century. So most of today's lessons are going to be focused around the abolition of the death penalty, the changes to the prison system, and also in particular attitudes towards women, children, and the mentally ill and young offenders. And we'll also be looking at some of the alternatives to prison. So start off, a chance for you to extend your knowledge a little bit further, okay? Have a quick read through this, because later on this is going to come up in one of the topics, or one of the activities today. So have a pause here, have a quick read of this. So the death penalty, you should be well familiar with the death penalty now, in particular the death penalty all the way from Anglo-Saxon times right up until the Bloody Code and the end of the Bloody Code. Got a keyword here, okay, well worth you making a note of, this term abolished, okay, and so have a quick, make sure you've got that written down here. This timeline, okay, you are going to need this timeline later on in this topic, so download, either print it off the textbook or the attached Word PowerPoint document. But so yeah, the death penalty, right from Anglo-Saxon Britain times right up to the 20th century, execution was used as the ultimate punishment. We see, as time progresses, slowly but surely over a period of time, the death penalty becoming less and less popular, okay? Particularly when we look at the abolition of the Bloody Code. A lot of this was down to popular opinion, popular attitudes. People just didn't like the idea of the death penalty. Throughout the 19th century, it was looking, they were trying, many politicians and lawmakers were trying to get rid of it, okay? And you might be surprised, okay, let's just bring this up here, okay. Oh, sorry, I'm working with a new device today to try and make this. So you might be surprised that the death penalty wasn't actually abolished until 1965 in this country. So not that long ago, sort of 40 or 50 years ago. You know, I can remember as a young man growing up in the 1980s, it really wasn't that long ago. Yeah, for me, the death penalty was something that certainly my parents would have remembered in their time as a child. So yeah, ultimately it was something that you was quite recently got rid of. It was still used normally for things like murder and capital crimes. Okay, so remember then capital murder, okay, committing murders on two different occasions, murder in the course of committing theft, killing somebody by shooting or explosion, killing somebody while resisting arrest, okay, during an escape from authorities, a prison officer or police officer. So, as said, yeah, it was right until in fact, we're going to be looking at a case study of a man called Derek Bentley, who was one of the last people to receive the death penalty. Okay, so in the early 1950s, okay, around 15 people a year were executed. The Homicide Act of 1957, okay, let's get my highlight up here. So Homicide Act of 1957 restricted the death penalty to the most serious cases, capital murders. Okay. After 1957, there was an average of 4 executions. We go from 15 to 4. Okay, 1965, the Murder Act suspended the death penalty, okay, for murder for 5 years. So they actually scrapped it for 5 years. Okay, and then the decision was made permanent in 1969. A few crimes continue to carry death penalty. Espionage, so being a spy, arson in the royal dockyards, so setting fire to any royal boats, piracy with violence, okay, all right, and what have you. And eventually, all crimes, 1998, so still not that long ago. Okay, so I've got a brief activity for you here. Have a quick read through. So first of all, read through pages 100 to 20 and 121. As I say, get that timeline written, get it top of your book. Have a quick read through this, okay, and then complete this activity down here. Pause the video and then come back when you're ready. So, popular opinion. Why was the death penalty becoming increasingly unpopular? And eventually, why was it scrapped altogether? So first of all, okay, in Parliament, there was the House of Commons were passing bills trying to abolish the death penalty, but these were getting blocked by the House of Lords. Yeah. Eventually, the death penalty was abolished in 1965 by the Home Secretary Roy Jenkins. Okay, eventually it was. So a lot of it was down to popular opinion. So this newspaper here is really, really useful because you've got a variety of different public attitudes. Okay, there's about 2 or 3 different conflicting public attitudes here. 1, okay, hanging to end. 2, and then we've got the MPs. 3. So look at the source A. How useful is it in understanding how the population have felt about the death penalty? So think about things like the reliability of the source, the nature, the origins, the purpose of the source, what it tells us, what it can tell us. Okay, pause the video and answer this question then, please. So, during the 20th century, children were increasingly shown more tolerance, okay? It was recognized that children were not the same as adults. So, you know, think back to Victorian times, think back to our story of Oliver, think back to how children were treated, and essentially they were treated the same as adults. In 1908, the Children's Act said that under 16s can no longer be sentenced to death. How many of you watching this are under 16 right now? Okay. The Young Persons Act in 1933, the age limit was raised to 18. Okay. Oh, sorry. What, under 16s, 18. Okay, the same act set criminal responsibility at 8 years old. So 1933, if you were over the age of 8, you could be tried as a criminal. And in 1963, that was raised to 10. Okay. The Infanticide Act of 1922 said that women would not be punished with the death penalty if they killed a child shortly after its birth. This was as a result because there were increasingly doctors and mental health professionals were starting to understand the link between childbirth and depression, postnatal depression and things like that, and that woman's mental state could often be affected by pregnancy and childhood. So again, the 1960s, we keep coming back to the 1960s, yeah? You know, by means, speak to your mums and dads about it. The chances are they're probably about the same age as me, so they won't know about it. But certainly my dad grew up in the 1960s, okay? And he can tell you that these were massive times for change. Okay, so overall, it was more liberal. 1960s was more, oh, look at that. If I push hard with my little pen, it gets wider. Okay, so we've got that liberal and age of responsibility here. Not much better than my mouse, but I'm sure I'll get better. Okay, so have another read through this text and complete these questions down here. Make sure you've got your key terms written in. Pause the video where you need it. So we've got a variety of different, we've got two sources here. Oh, lost my pen. We've got this source and this source. So look at this picture here and have a read of this. There's a timeline here. So in the 1950s, there are a series of controversial executions. Okay. All right. For more details about Derek Bentley, see if I can get a hang of this. Yeah, I can read on it. Right. So look at these, answer these questions here. Look at these sources, and here to help you with that, refer to the textbook in a minute. Like I said, Derek Bentley, we're going to be looking at him in more detail another time. Okay, so pause and complete these activities. So the prison system, we've had a look at essentially how the death penalty, changing attitudes towards the death penalty leading up to its abolition. Prison, since it was originally set up, if you think back to way all the way back to early Anglo-Saxon times, prisons were never meant to be, okay, a long-lasting, long-term punishment. It wasn't really until the 18th century, with the work of people like Jeremy Bentham and Elizabeth Fry, we start to see the foundation and the setting up of the prison systems, okay? And eventually prisons started to take the place of or replace things like the death penalty. During the 20th century, we start to see prisons being changed from punishment to more about reform, okay? And all about actually helping and reforming the criminal rather than punishing them. In particular, okay, we see young offenders in the prison system, okay, being treated more sensitively in the criminal justice system, okay. £40,000. I don't know how accurate that particular figure is now. The chances are that when this PowerPoint was originally made, although I've made quite considerable changes to it today, the chances are that it's even higher now. I'd say it's probably 65 or 70. So that is a year, all right? That is how much a year it costs, maybe even more, to keep one prisoner in prison. Yeah, okay, probably more than that, in fact. In 2017, okay, the prison system is described as being overcrowded and understaffed. There's too many prisoners and not enough prison officers. In fact, actually, I can tell you now that the prison service, as things currently stand, are currently recruiting. Okay, there's a big recruitment drive in the prison system. Okay, and it's a great job that's well paid and it's got good career potential. So find the table, that's on page 123, okay, and get a copy of that, get it in your books. Ignore the information sheets because we're doing something else instead. So have a quick look here. So make sure, so this is the table. This is the table that was mentioned in the previous scene, the table, yeah? Make sure you've got a copy of this, all right? Then have a look at these two sources, this one and this one, okay? Read some of this text as well. While there are questions today about the use of prisons, yeah, let's just have a quick read of source C. Vicky Price describes her experience of East Sutton Open Prison in October 2013. It was a far cry from what we had left behind. Even so, I was astonished to discover that Friday night was karaoke night in the pool room. That would be a room with a pool table in rather than actually a swimming pool, between 8:30 and 10:30, which I went to on my first night. Saturday night was bingo night. But you did have to pay a fee of 50p. Bedtime was 11 on weekdays and midnight on the weekends. The right wing call for tougher regimes. Forget one fact. These women losing their liberty, their families is the losing their liberty and their families is the most horrific thing to happen to them. Have a quick look at. So we've got here. I'll find my little pen thing here. Here we go. This is the UK prison population. All right. So notice it rising. 2015. I don't know what it is now. Perhaps that's something you could look up. You could do a little bit of research on that. Find out what it is now. What is the UK prison population today? Okay, so bearing in mind, looking at all that you've got here. Okay, so let me just get my little here. Winter. So looking at everything that's on this page, why are there questions about this use of prisons today? Now, here we go. This is your chance, your opportunity. You know, do you think, that prisons are fair today? Having looked at what all this information is, do you think this is suitable for the way we could be treating, and there are people in prison today who might be murderers or mass murderers, or pedophiles or do some really terrible things, okay? Should they get ballrooms and should they get Friday night karaoke? Should they be treated the same as somebody who's just been caught stealing bread to feed their family? Do you think there could be alternatives to prison? All right. Make sure you explain yourself. Pause here and complete these questions. So Borstals. Borstals. This is a far cry. This is your parents won't remember anything about Borstals, okay? I certainly don't. I must admit, if we look at this date here, so 1982. So Borstals weren't abolished until 1982. And my childhood was in the 1980s. And if I was being naughty at school, which I frequently was, my mum and dad would threaten to send me to Borstal. And of course, after I had no idea, growing up in the 1980s, that Borstals had been abolished. Okay, I just knew that they existed or had existed, and that they were tough, horrendous, horrible places. Okay, and it was certainly something that when I was naughty, I was threatened with. So the first Borstal was set up in Kent in 1902. It was a prison for boys, naughty boys, bad boys, young criminal offender boys, and the idea was it was to keep young boys from mixing with older men, to protect them, but more importantly, to stop them growing up alongside seasoned criminals and being trained by those seasoned criminals. So in 1908, the Prevention of Crime Act created a national system of Borstals, okay, to emphasize education. Now, where's my little highlighter here? Okay, so it's all about education rather than punishment, okay? The day was structured. It was kind of like a school. It was meant to be a prison school, a school prison, if you like, where, young offenders could learn practical skills, all right? And hopefully try and lower the reoffending rates. Now, your parents may or may not know about this video here, okay? It is a film with famous Ray Winston in it, okay? Now, it is available on YouTube, or certainly I've seen it on YouTube. Ladies, gents, it is an 18 rated movie. I would say don't go rushing off and don't watch this. Do not watch it without your parents' permission. Speak to your parents about it, okay? It is quite violent and quite offensive. Even for an 18, it's quite unpleasant. So please be careful researching this topic, okay? Don't go rushing out and watch this without speaking to your parents first. The chances are they will say no, and quite rightly so, it is not something that young people should be watching. So, young offenders, read through these pages in the textbook, okay? Get a copy of this timeline here. Where's my pointer? So get a copy of this timeline in your books and then answer these questions here. What are borstals? How do they work? Etc., etc. Okay. All right. Pause the video, complete these questions. So what reforms too were taken place? Have a read through the text, these two stacks of text here, and look at how essentially youth justice changed and reformed, firstly in the 1940s, then the 1960s, and then how there was a focus on rehabilitation. Now, I want to highlight up here. This is a keyword, reform. These are both keywords. If you don't know what reform and rehabilitation mean now, you need to get your head around them. Go away, look these up, make sure you know what these words mean, okay? Have a read through these two blocks of text and complete these activities down here. So what alternatives were there to prisons? So the antisocial behaviour orders. Now, I believe these are actually scrapped, okay? I think at the time that the Edexcel specification was written, this was in about 2016, the ASBOs still existed. They've now scrapped these no longer happen. I'm not quite sure, I think it happened in 2018, okay, but you will still be asked about them in your exam, okay? So, you know, although it's now kind of like new history, it's still something you should be aware of. Community service, yeah, get people in those orange jumpsuits, get them out, get them cleaning up the dog poop and scrubbing graffiti off the sides of bridges and stuff. Restorative justice, you might even experience a little bit of this in school where you have to sit down and talk it out, yeah? So restorative justice, in the case of maybe less serious crimes, yeah? Okay, we're not suggesting for a second now that a murderer has to sit down in front of the family of the people that he's murdered, he or she's murdered, okay? But so certainly it's the idea is that, you know, somebody has to sit down in front of their victims and listen to how their crime has affected the life of the victims. More recently, we've started to understand that just because people have problems with drugs and alcohol, that doesn't necessarily make them criminals, although certainly they might commit crimes because of their addictions. So today now in modern society, we're starting to try and treat the drugs and the alcohol problems rather than, you know, so find a solution to those rather than actually the committing of the crimes. And then we've got the good old fashioned tagging, the tag system here. Okay, so, you know, think back to essentially the fact that prisons are overcrowded and understaffed. Okay, this could be for maybe minor crimes, it could be a suitable alternative to those. So in summary then, okay, at the very start of the 20th century, capital punishment was still being used, but usually as a punishment to murder. In 1965, capital punishment for murder was abolished. So we see in the 1940s, the Labour government at the time, including many radical welfare social reforms, including youth justice. In the 20th century, there were new ideas about the purpose of prison and changing attitudes meant modern courts use alternative punishments. Okay, right, to round this lesson off then, ladies and gents, okay, pause the video, or you might as well end it or pause it here, okay, and complete the strengthen and challenge checkpoints. Thank you very much, Year 9s, and good luck.